Hey everyone, Castle here. About to explain some stuff. Alright, so, one of the main things that I've been going over right now is how to get the UX to work better for, actually applying materials to different objects and stuff like that, and making it so that the meshes and everything like that don't feel so bad when you're actually working with them. Um, so just as I'm kind of like, playing around with things and trying to get like meshes, different materials in place and everything like that. I think I have a few ideas on how this can actually be made to be pretty nice actually. Maybe I don't know like what would be better. Honestly though, in some ways, since this editor is so specific to what it's supposed to be done, used for, I actually think that this could be more efficient than more broader level design tools that are meant to be more multi-purpose or multifaceted. This is a much more down and dirty and faster kind of a way to just sort of think about everything. I mean, that's kind of the main thoughts on the process. But so there's a few things right now that bug me a lot. For one, when I leave meshes mode, it forgets what I had selected before. See that? So like if I go into base and I go into walls, right? And then I get out of it and then I come back again, or if I leave meshes mode so that I can kind of look around, which is something that you're going to do a lot because you want to be able to see what you're looking at without having some selected blue object in your face, right? Um, and you go back again, it resets these values back to what they originally were. So I'm thinking like right away, it should always just remember whatever it was that you had selected last, so that you can do that, right? But there's some other complications here as well. So like too often people are going to want to copy this wall and be like, "Okay, well, I'm just going to make this wall look like this wall, right?" Um there may actually be a way where I can make it automatically figure out that since they're both walls, just find one that has the same material. Like iterate through the list of walls in the wall list, find the one that has this mesh, but this material or something like that, and have it just like automatically figure that out, so you don't even have to think about it, and it just places that version of that object. Um, like logical logical mesh replace, right? Now that would be really nice. And that's not super hard to do actually. The only thing is that I'd have to the it would mess up on a lot of stuff because not all objects have the same. I'd have to like iterate through just to find like it wouldn't work very well in some cases because some objects actually have more than two, more than one material ID and stuff like that. So that's definitely not perfect, but at least it's kind of better. So, just making sure that it remembers, where you were before is already a pretty big deal. But let's see. I don't know. I'm thinking like, all right. So, let me take a look here. So, yeah. So whenever you press the C key, what you're doing is you're copying the current object right here, right? This is your builder object right here, right? On that side. And that's the current thing that you have selected when you press C, right? I think that this should automatically set the type, the environment and type, boom, automatically. Anytime you copy an object, like if I copy this object, it should automatically go right into prototype and it should go to yeah, I guess it would be walls. It would be the tall walls, right? But you see, wall and prototype actually kind of has like a bunch of stuff already in it. Hmm. Well, I could do something where it types in the you know, wall tall like that, and then you know what I mean. But it would have to be smart enough to ignore the number or something like that. It's not out of the question, but I think that ultimately what should happen is whenever you press the C key on something, it should give you a full list of all objects um that you can replace that object with. So so like it might require me to kind of rework how this works, how I'm thinking about the listing. But if I press the C key right here, all right, and I go into this list, it should literally just show all applicable objects that I can replace this object with. But um, the problem with that though is that if this is a prototype object, I'm going to want to be able to see like all of the base objects that I can replace it with instead. Shit. Um, I don't know. It feels like it's like if I can just get a little bit more efficiency on this and make it so that you can't accidentally replace an object with something that of a different mesh. Replace object won't work if the mesh is not the same. So like if you try to do the replace thing and the mesh is not the same, um, maybe it won't let you do it. I don't know. So like there's a lot of this kind of just thinking about in terms of like how to get this editor to be as efficient as possible. Like what did I just do right there? See, I hate when this happens because you don't know what happened to that object. Like this was a wall. Like what the fuck? Is there it was sitting in that wall? Like what? Um wow. Why is it rotating like that? Uh, yeah, there's stuff right now that I just got to figure out. Like but it's not. It's like it's on the edge though. Like I can definitely see it working out okay and being efficient enough and everything like that. And I could definitely see it happening where it's not that big of a deal. Also, a lot of the objects like this map is kind of old, so a lot of these objects were probably placed with some kind of different rule set. Like when I'm still developing how the objects are actually placed, so like that error we just saw might not exist with anything that was that's more recently placed. Like I certainly haven't seen that happen with any of the newer objects or anything like that. But you know, um, it's possible too that I could just sort of break the rules in some cases where you know if you press C on this and you get this wall texture, right? Then you can just press T and then it'll just slap that wall texture on it or something like that. I still have the T key. I haven't gotten rid of the T key. Basically, the T key was for replacing a texture that already exists or something. And it's possible that I could I don't know, but I really want to keep it all object, you know, based on what the object is itself, rather than having to be able to save and replicate like material IDs. I'd rather just replicate one data table row and just leave it at that, and let the client and the server figure out what that entails exactly on their own. So that way you don't have to replicate like 50,000 things. You just replicate one fucking variable, and it just it does what it's supposed to do. Um, yeah, I don't know. there's very much a lot of brainstorming going on right now, but you could definitely tell that there's obviously a lot of progress being made. There's a lot of stuff happening uh, to kind of get things in place and figure out how to start just getting art in and everything like that. Now, I know that I've talked about a lot with like how what kind of a game that yeah, this is actually kind of an interesting thing to talk about too. Like I've been sort of thinking a lot about what kind of what Revulsion 2 will be like, and it's definitely kind of leaning a lot more into the whole like um, open world kind of a game. But that's really it's really not because I want to make a open world survival game. It's just because I want a game where you can have a bunch of your friends and you just can play together and there's no limit to how many people you can have on your team. You know what I mean? It's not like certain games like you can only play with four people. I want something where it's like everybody's kind of just dependent, not only dependent on each other, but everybody kind of just like works together and kind of like you can play very casually. People can come and go at their own leisure, and you know what I mean. Like it's sort of exactly how those kinds of open world games work. Now, it's not so much that that is like necessarily the best thing to do for a first person shooter. No, it's this is actually kind of going in the direction of like my goal is to make the game so that it's fun to play with as many people as possible because I think that that is a key factor on how to get this right. In order to make this something that it will be not only addicting but like it'll keep people going because you form connections with your friends and everything like that, and everyone's kind of dependent on each other, so it just keeps people going in that sort of sense. And it just so happens that having a sort of open world kind of a game like those open world survival games like 7 Days to Die and stuff like that tend to kind of work that way, where you get like five or six of your friends and you all make a server together, and you run around in a gigantic map, and you grind loot together, and monsters are all over the place, and you fight them and stuff like that. Having something that's more on the end of a classic shooter though, where you're actually like circle strafing and shooting, and everybody has like tons of ammo. Ammo isn't something that you have to craft, but it's rather just a part of like your loot. Um, and you know what I mean. It's a lot more shooty. It's a lot more shooty. It's a lot more like playing Quake or Doom or something like that. But you still have this sort of element of being more open-ended and exploring places and doing things in these places so that you can get you can build a fort and you can craft and all that, right? That's the idea. Like, so, um, even if that doesn't necessarily need to be the way to go, like, if someone could suggest something where it's not like that, but it still encompasses that one design goal of incorporating, having five or six friends, maybe even 12 friends or something like that, all just kind of hanging out in the same world together and enjoying the game together. Um, maybe a massive co-op experience or something like that, where it still ends up flowing just kind of like a classic shooter, but you're still you still have like 12 of your friends. The problem is that if you start doing linear content, um, it becomes harder and harder to balance once you start getting more than three people. You know what I mean? Like two-player co-op, you can balance mostly for a single player. Like a linear experience where you have boss fight, and you fight these guys over here. Like once you start getting to like three or four players together at once, you start noticing that when you're fighting one boss monster, it's three versus one, three versus one, three versus one. It's not just three versus one. It's three versus one, three versus one, three versus one. It multiplies. It gets ridiculous around four players. Anytime you start getting around five players, anything that you try to balance beyond that, because like 5 versus 1, 5 versus 1, 5 versus 1, it's at that point it gets hard to even fucking remember how many times I said it. Um, it's not it's not going to be very easy to balance. Like the monsters are going to have to be ridiculously strong at that point, and that causes a power creep with the, and that probably causes other problems and stuff like that. But if you have something that's a little bit more akin to something like you know, I don't want to use Fallout 76 too much as an example, but Fallout 76 is like, you kind of have you can have sort of bigger battles, but like, three or four of your friends could be over somewhere else, doing something else over there, and then you come back to the fort and you're hanging out and then you're getting stuff like Ark or something like that. That tends to work a lot better when you have a lot of players together. Trying to make something where it's like, if I do the standard find key open door dungeons for a classic shooter, um, then you start running into problems where you are going to have to limit how many people can play. Otherwise, it's just not going to be a challenge. You could just, over gear and overpower anything that you can possibly face within reason, just by bringing more people. You know what I mean? So like, there's no way to balance the more linear style level design unless you limit the number of co-op friends. So I've really I've wrestled a lot with, you know not diverging too much with the core elements of that already exist uh, uh, with Revulsion 1. And well, I could just go more like the Warframe route, where you just get like three or four of your friends, and that's all you play together. But I don't want three or four of my friends. I want 6 to 8. I want 12 people potentially playing on the same server. Like I want to have it where it's like there isn't a limit really. Within reason. I want to have it where it's not just um, a few people. Like the more the merrier kind of a thing. But also too, there already are games like Warframe, and there already are games like Destiny and stuff like that, right? Um, so, but I don't think anybody has done open world survival through the lens of a classic shooter. That has never happened. In fact, it might clash in a lot of ways. I don't think it'll clash too badly because my experience with something like Fallout 3, Fallout 4, like, you can have some pretty amazing shooting, combat sequences in those, in Fallout 4 or Fallout whatever, right? Like, I've already experienced that kind of stuff, and that sort of like, you stop for a second, and you shoot like five dudes, like playing these games when they're modded and they have like increased spawns and stuff like that. It's a blast. It's a fucking blast. There's no way for me to be able to say like, oh, fighting a bunch of shotgun dudes and a fucking some demons and maybe some sentient creatures that kind of you know or you know what I mean. Like it's like it would work out fine. You know what I mean? Like even if it was smarter enemy types, sort of like what you would find in Halo or something like that, it would work. I think it would be fantastic. It would be just fine, but it would also feel like a classic shooter. It wouldn't be this like weird shit that you have to do in like 7 Days to Die, where you can't even fucking find the hitbox for a headshot on a zombie or something like that. In this case, it would be like literally playing like you know, Unreal or Quake or Doom or something, where every shot, you see these like slow moving projectiles coming towards you and you're like dodging them and you headshot a fucking demon and you know what I mean? It's sort of like a weird cross of a weird mix of like all these different things, and then once you finish that, like you'll notice that like somebody dropped a gun, and it's kind of a little bit like Borderlands at that point. That that right now, I mean, yeah, like, and then and then in addition to that, people can make their own maps, and it's designed in such a way where the level design is done in a social experience. Like everything is more social. I'm thinking that it's like to a point where, um, I even went the level, the level design is already a social thing, right? So that makes it so that the maps can get really big and well handcrafted, and there can be like different areas inside of the levels that get built using the hierarchical instancing. Somebody can be working on like another section of the world on their own, as long as they know how big of the space, that they have to work with is and stuff like that, right? Right? Like, there's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said for going more in the social and direction, and with and allowing modding in a way that even AAA studios can't really compete with. You know what I mean? It offers something that I don't think anybody is doing. Um, at least not all at once. You know, most of the games in this space right now for Revulsion are, in the indie first-person shooter market, are single player, and you know they don't really, they're not really changing anything. They're just sort of sticking to the old formula, which is fine. But I think that one of the ways to really blow the doors wide open on this whole thing is to just take this into the multiplayer direction. You know what I mean? I think that the multiplayer direction, and I don't just mean co-op, I mean fucking full out, open world, and still having the same kinds of combat that you're used to playing with these kinds of games, but like you still have these areas that are like this over here, but you also have a lot of like open, much larger open spaces. You have to there's a spawn point over here, and you kill that rocket launcher guy. There's a grenadier over here. You know what I mean? Like, and then you kind of come down and around, and maybe there's like a key that you can have, but the key only lasts for so long, and like maybe these are like mini dungeons or something like that that you can kind of do um, more organically, and then you can unlock like actual dungeons where you can get 3 or 4 people to queue together, and then after you're done, you come back to the server that you were already on. You know what I mean? Like, hmm, I think that I think going full out multiplayer and trying to get things to be as open ended as possible is the ideal direction for this. And I've thought about it over and over again. And I know it might seem strange to go the open world survival route. It just seems I've arrived at this conclusion from like 5 different steps. It's not like something I just like, oh wow, he's just gonna do open world survival too. I've also thought about too, like, if Revulsion 2 is significantly different from Revulsion 1, then the existence of Revulsion 2 doesn't necessarily negate the existence of Revulsion 1. That one of the things that they say in the indie game development market is that you have to have a long tail. In my case, I would be like completely cutting my tail off right away the very moment that I make Revulsion 2 exactly the same thing as Revulsion 1 but better. There'd be no reason to go back anymore. Well, I guess with that said, I'm gonna go ahead. Gonna end this video here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, I'm definitely thinking about a lot of this, like, and things are coming together. I just have to. I figure out this texturing thing, um, and that's pretty much the last really big hurdle as far as like actually building. As far as the editor is concerned, and the rest of it just boils down to me, adding more static meshes and just kind of getting more materials and static meshes in place, and then just making them available. So if I can get the UX for the actual placement and creation of like these types of things, like placing meshes, and then if I press C, and then now I can see a full list of all meshes in base. You know what I mean? Like, I think this could work. Like, I got a good feeling. I got a good feeling that it's just a couple of tweaks away from being at least pretty decent in terms of like assigning materials and stuff. And I just got to make sure that people don't accidentally modify objects by replacing them with objects that don't actually work that way. Like replacing a wall with a floor or something like that is pretty annoying. And then you got to figure out what the hell you just did. And, that flow sucks ass, and I'll have to make sure that I can kind of get around that and everything. All right. So with that said, that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna end this now. Take it easy.